Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is American journalist based in Taipei, Kaitlin Menza. Hi, Kaitlin, and welcome to Curito Connects.
Hi there.
Okay, so what an honor it is to have you on today as a fellow podcaster, a former podcast royally obsessed, and from the East Coast of the US, living that glamour life of traveling, dining, exploring, and sharing it with the world through your writing, to finding love, getting pregnant, moving to a new country, and becoming an expat. Kaitlin shares how she has navigated these major life changes and continues to share them through her writing. So, without further ado, let me have Kaitlin introduce herself to our listeners today and how she ended up where she is today in life and career path.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I listened to a bunch of episodes of the show before this, and I feel like everyone would react to your intro with like, wow, that's so nice. You make me sound so cool. There's something special about hearing your life described by somebody else. I'm like, that sounds like a fun life. Yeah, so like you said, I grew up on the East Coast. I've actually, until I moved to Taipei almost 2 years ago, I had never lived beyond the East Coast within a triangle. I grew up in New Jersey. I went to college near Philadelphia, and then I lived in New York post college up until recently. So I've never really lived more than 90 minutes from home. From where I was born, even. And so, yeah, I studied sociology in college and always interned at different magazines and newspapers. And then I spent my 20s working at mostly women's magazines and teen magazines. And then I went freelance in my later 20s. And so I've been writing for lots of different publications. On all kinds of different topics since then. And yeah, I moved to Taiwan in 2022 with my husband because he was starting a business. He opened a restaurant here, and we've since started a family. I had my first baby last year, and there we are. So that's a quick summary of the life story.
Everything in a nutshell. So,
Yes.
let's rewind a little bit and go back to your early years. Did you always know you wanted to be a journalist? Like, do you remember when you were young that you always how some kids like to draw, some kids like to play outside? Were you the one with your pen and paper, often jotting down things and like writing stories and, taking your experiences that you had and then, going like, Mom, look, I made a book. I don't know. Just,
Yes.
was that something that you
That's
kind of knew
Yeah,
that's what
that's
you wanted?
exactly what it looked like. I mean, sometimes I feel like people's narrative. I'm fascinated with people's narratives of themselves, of course, as a storyteller. And sometimes I feel like create a narrative in retrospect. It was one of the things I loved. Yes, I used to. I have a very distinct memory of when I was a little kid. Carrying around a Hello Kitty notebook and interviewing the people in my neighborhood and writing down their answers to questions. I loved to read. I loved to wander like borders with my parents or go to the library. I loved to read. And my mom subscribed to tons of magazines. So I loved reading all adult magazines, probably that I shouldn't have. Like, she was a Cosmo subscriber. I was reading that probably way too young, but I always loved magazines. And I remember one of them giving career, I think it's probably Cosmo Girl, giving career tips. And one of the questions was, ask yourself, what would you do on your birthday? Like, how would you love to spend an afternoon? Like, what would make you the happiest? And for me, when I asked myself that question as a tween, it was, I would want to go to Barnes and Noble or Borders and just hang out around the books and magazines for hours and hours. So that was sort of the early percolating of that. And I also think I didn't realize it could be a job. I was like, wow, there's actually people who make the magazines. Like, I love magazines. I loved everything about them. I remember distinctly waiting at the mailbox when I knew a certain magazine was due to arrive. I thought they were just so, so fun. So all of those moments were there. And certainly, if you ask my mom to recount the trajectory, that's how she would do it. But there were plenty of other interests along the way. I went into college as a psychology major. But I think that I'm still really interested in psychology, but not in the way of becoming a therapist or a clinician or anything like that. I'm interested in the psychology of why people do the things they do, but that manifests in storytelling. So I did take some psychology classes and I wound up, like I said, a sociology major. But for me, it was about, why do people do the things they do? Why do they behave the way they do? And I found that in journalism. So it just, all of these paths kind of converged. And I kept
Mm.
trying for it and trying for internships, being like, will I even be allowed to do this? And then once I was, it still feels like a miracle to me that I was able to do this work.
What were your favorite magazines? It's just when you said magazines, I was thinking I remember those days because actually,
Mhm.
even though living in Taiwan, but going through an U.S. education system, we also ordered magazines as well. So I
Yes.
definitely remember magazines, and before e-commerce, when you shopped,
Mhm.
it was also through magazines, right? You fill out the little order form
Oh
and you
yeah.
send it in to get your items. Which ones were some of your favorites that you
Oh
remember?
gosh. I got them all. I actually think we came of age, and again, I'm sure it was a little different being in Taiwan, but we came of age in like a really heavy time for teen magazines that all
Yeah,
kind of were gone
Seventeen.
by
Yep.
like '08.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Cosmo Girl, Elle Girl, Teen People, like every adult magazine had a kid version, and I got them all. I got American Girl magazine, made by the people who make the dolls. Let's see, YM, of course, and 17, and Teen Vogue launched when I was a teenager. I later worked at both 17 and Teen Vogue. But I even remember I still have, of course, an older cousin who's 4 years older than me. And so I always thought and still think she is the coolest. And I would have sleepovers with her and stay up late reading her 17 magazines because it was such a preview of this idea of adulthood or older teenagedom that I could not wait to get to. I was just going to say, I remember going to sleepovers and you would just go with a stack of magazines and like take the quizzes or follow the makeup tips, or it almost like gave you something to do at the sleepover. It like guided the sleepovers. Let's talk about this kissing article. Let's, read the astrology, like let's read the horoscopes and those kinds of things. It really gave you the material to tell you what being a teenager was supposed to be like. At least that's what it felt like to me at the time.
No, no, I agree, 100%. Which, I mean, this is gonna be if I throw this question out there, it's gonna be a tangent to what we're gonna talk about today, but I will still throw it out there, and
Please.
we can come back to it later, but I wanted to then ask you how you think that has changed since those prints are no longer around, right? And how do young adolescents today get that same information, even, and I know it's like through social media, there's a
Mhm.
lot of social media platform, but it's not really the same as what we were describing earlier, the print magazine, which comes as a monthly subscription. And it's like
Yes.
every month you're excited to, because you don't know what's coming and you get
Yes.
it. And it's like that feature for that month. It's these things. It's what's trending now versus now
Mhm.
in our world today. It's what's trending last week is different from what's trending
Yes.
today.
Yes. I
So,
mean, of course, it breaks my heart as someone who loves magazines to have watched the industry. I mean, as a magazine fan and as a magazine employee, to watch the industry completely collapse during in the last 15 years has been absolutely heartbreaking to me and to my bank account, frankly. But and I've been laid off several times. But yeah, I mean, all the teen magazines are gone. 17 and Teen Vogue are no longer in print. So my resume has also kind of evaporated. But it makes me so sad, but that they don't need them in the same way. Like I grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey, so it wasn't like I was cut off in, let's say a rural area of a central state or anything like that. But magazines were a lifeline to me to connect me to this greater world. And I think when teenagers have the internet, they don't need it the way perhaps I needed it. And so that part is okay to me, but it does make me sad to think that there's just no routine print reading. I don't really know how young people are getting I know how they're getting their culture. They're on TikTok, and I love TikTok as well, but I don't know. It's just a completely different framework. I mean, how do you learn kissing tips or how to put on makeup? You learn that now from TikTok, maybe. Well, maybe I don't know about the kissing tips, but obviously, like those magazines were easy to make fun of, and it speaks to a time of a sort of monoculture of like, this is the artist everyone should care about, which just does not happen these days. But that change was happening even when I was on staff. So I was at 17 magazine from 2011 to 2013. In that time, I covered the celebrities there. At the beginning, we would tell the reader, this artist is cool. Like, I would go to the record label and they would say, here are the 3 artists we think teenagers are going to like. I would choose my favorite and I would put them in the magazine and say, this is the artist that's cool for summer 2012. By the time I left, the teenagers were telling us, like, they were saying, One Direction, we have a Tumblr fandom around One Direction. It's an artist out of, like, a band out of the UK. They're already huge to us. You should put them in the magazine. Like, we had to catch up to them instead of us telling them it was cool. So already that switch was happening where you had to respond to the market. You weren't guiding the market. So, it was hard to play catch up to 15-year-olds, but they were right about so many things. One Direction, One Direction and Harry Styles, chief among them, for sure.
Do you think that um okay, so I like how you shared with us that
Mhm.
change, because I wanted to ask you, when you finished school, like when you finished college, and you like you said earlier, you were trying to apply for all these different roles
Mhm.
at these companies because that's what you wanted to do. Um, can you tell us a little bit? I mean, I feel like this is kind of outdated because you were saying, like,
Mhm.
print is no longer a thing.
Yes.
But back in the day,
Yeah,
what was it
exactly.
like for a fresh grad? And I think we graduated around the same time, which is
Mhm.
the Lehman Brothers financial crisis.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
what was that like to pitch yourself to publishers and magazines, right? Like, in
Mhm.
terms of, you want to write, but it's like, well, which category are you going to write about? Or, to be able to
Yeah.
then land that role. And then from there, as a journalist, how do you continue that,
Right.
and then for yourself personally, because, you're constantly, as a journalist, you're constantly, like you said, interviewing other people, collecting the stories and then writing about it. How has that helped you evolve yourself as well,
Yeah.
as a parallel?
Yeah, yes, I think the methods of how people might go about getting a job have changed. But even for me at the time, yes, I was applying for jobs the summer of 2009, which was very bleak. And um, you even then it had changed so much from the time that my mentors or my old bosses at internships had applied for jobs. Like, I still think about how one of my bosses at 17, when the month she graduated from college, she had job offers from 4 magazines. Like, she got to choose which of the 4 magazines she wanted to work at. There were more magazines with more money when she was graduating in the late 90s. That was a real heyday of magazines, as discussed with all the teen ones. So it was definitely not that. But the way I did it, that is the way I still do so much of my work, which is blind emailing. There's honestly something that's like so thrilling to me about blind emailing, which is what a pedestrian thrill. Like, this is my thrill seeking, is I would just email everybody. And say I admired that article, or I'd like to get coffee, or this was also not an original thing to do. This was what all the advice was at the time, was like, go ask for the things that you want. And I still think this is true, even though so much has changed with job seeking. I still think like really attacking what you want is the way. So my first job out of college wound up being at Glamour magazine, and I had interned there. And the way I got my internship, I'll try to keep this quick because it's like so in the weeds magazine-y, but there's this um, national magazine association, and they have an internship, and they've had it since the 60s or 70s. They select 30 or so students and they place them at magazines and pay for their housing, and it's a very prestigious internship. I wanted it so bad from the moment I heard it existed. I applied through my college. I got it. I was one of those 30 students. And then once you get it, they have the selection of magazines that they place you at. One of them was Glamour. To me, it was the best one. I wanted it. So once I got accepted, I blind emailed 4 editors at Glamour and we're like, I don't know who's the internship coordinator, but you should select me from this pool of 30 people to be your intern. So they did. Someone did. And then once I was there, interned my little butt off and I worked nights and weekends and I just tried so hard and I wrote thank you notes to all like 40 of the staffers. And my last week, one of them said, like, let's keep in touch. I think I'd like to hire you next year. And she did. So that was, but then I kept in touch with her. I'd email her every 3 months, which again was what all the career books told me to do. Um, and I followed all the advice. Any career advice I could have. I loved reading career. I still do love reading career advice. And so much of it was just keep in touch with people that you connect with. And I would just email and email and email people to remind them that I existed. And now I just email people and ask them, can I tell your story? And usually people are flattered by that, even when they're used to that request. So you never know who's going to say yes. And that's like so thrilling to me. I still love doing that.
People do say no as well, though.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But to me, it's like I send it off and I'm like, I can't have done any more than I just did.
Mhm.
So at least I know I tried for it. You know, someone like if I see that someone else is going to do it, or if someone does it or gets the job or gets the interview that I wanted, at least I can say I tried for it too. Um,
Mm.
and that's, yeah, they definitely say no. But that's the thing. That's why I cast a wide net and I wrote all those thank you notes and I applied for so many internships. I mean, I had something like 6 or 7 internships in college also, which even the concept of an internship might be a little outdated at this point. I don't know how you would get a print magazine internship, but yeah, I just interned my butt off and it was so fun. Like I loved it. I didn't want to go back to school. So, it didn't, I didn't just follow that career advice because that's what I was supposed to do. I wanted that. I wanted that work so bad. And I still do.
Mm. So so it's like that passion for you, actually, like you said earlier on, was always there from a very young age. So you're one of those lucky ones, as they say, that you knew very early on what you
Yeah.
wanted to do.
Yes. And I think I follow that what's the word, like axiom of I would absolutely do it even if I weren't getting paid. Like I just can't believe that I get to like interview celebrities or do travel writing. Like this is dream stuff to me. For I just don't,
Mhm.
I can't believe it's real and that I get to do it. So I would do it for free. Don't tell my employers that because I do have bills, but I would do it all for free. So I can't believe that I get to do it truly still.
And do you feel like whenever you interview people or you write their stories, I mentioned asked this a little bit earlier on, but like how
Mhm.
that has also shaped you personally, like
Mhm.
as an individual, and how you've grown along with your stories, basically, like
Yeah.
the different people you've met and the different things you've heard and learned. I think that's funny. I didn't realize you majored in sociology, because I did too.
Oh,
So,
really?
so I think our interest in people and
It's so funny.
storytelling and understanding why and what they do,
Yeah, that makes
it makes sense.
sense.
Yeah.
I love that. Should have known. Should have known. But yeah, I think
So
my
yeah.
desire to sorry, to finish that thought that you were having, like, yeah, my desire to connect with people is it's definitely shaped me. I mean, I can't be separated from my job. I know that that might be like a very American slash unhealthy workaholic kind of thing, but kind of a sentiment. But I love my work, and it is formed so much of who I am, and I love going after what I want professionally. So, yeah, I don't know what came first, this aspect of my personality or the work, but they're completely intertwined for me.
Yeah. And then just a little side track again, your podcast you had started with your friend,
Yes.
Royally Obsessed. Was that like in your timeline? Was that kind of
Mhm.
in between a few like magazine gigs that like jobs you had, and then this opportunity came about? How did you? And I think that was even before podcasts were like super popular, right? That's
Yes.
when you were
Well,
doing it. Yeah.
to this degree, yes. It's funny, the royally obsessed thing. So yes, I hosted a podcast about the British royals with a friend, Lisa Ryan, from 2018 to 2020, which was basically right before Harry and Meghan's wedding up to when they quit, which was not exactly our plan, but when they not quit, when they stepped back. I'm making the quotations with my fingers, but yeah, that was honestly a professional opportunity, which we
Mm.
kind of revealed to listeners once we were 2 years in. But I had written about the royals a lot for pop culture sites. I was always interested in them. And then I was sort of headhunted by a media company that was launching a podcast arm because, to your point, they heard podcasts were like the up and coming. And so they started with a Royals podcast. And so I was really cast to do that. I had a job interview for it and everything. And then Lisa,
Oh.
yeah. And then Lisa, my co host, I did not know what they essentially gave us a chemistry test. Like they took us to coffee, the two of the producers, and just like watched us interact. And we had, we worked in the same industry and we knew people in common. So it was easy enough to talk, and now she's one of my best friends, so the chemistry test was successful. But yeah, it was mostly just fun. Like it was, to me, like really frothy fun. We never pretended to be super royal experts insofar as we weren't like in the royal rota, which is like the pool of reporters who follow them around in the UK. We were just fans from the other side of the pond. And so we tried to, of course, come at things from an educated, with a level of education about the royals that maybe the average American certainly doesn't have. But it was mostly just for fun. Like, oh, the kids did this really cute thing, or, I loved Meghan's dress at this. And then we decided to leave because we were just sort of over that world. And the podcast still continues with other hosts. But yeah, a lot of when Harry and Meghan decided to leave, and when things were getting really dark for them, it was also just like losing the fun for us too. So
Mm.
it happened to completely overlap that way. But and then our last episode was like was the middle of March 2020. So it was truly like when the pandemic was beginning in New York. And so we recorded our last episode remotely, and then that was kind of it for us, which was so sad. But Lisa and I stay friends, and she actually visited me in Taiwan last year during her honeymoon. But
Oh, how
yeah, it
fun.
was. I loved, it was a new medium for me, and I really enjoyed it, and I just could not believe, like, to me it was just having fun chatting, like gossiping about pop culture. And then we actually really got a following, which blew my mind, and we wound up doing TV spots. And the day of the royal wedding, I did a live TV segment with the Philippines, like on prime time in the Philippines. I appeared in a Brazilian documentary about the royals. Like I was on 2020 in the US. Like there was lots of content possibilities with the royals because people cannot get enough of them. And so I did a lot of TV. Like, just it was the most bizarre little stretch. Now I turn down any assignments to write about them because it's just, I don't know, again, it got really dark there with some of the coverage of Meghan Markle, and I'm just glad I don't have to. I still have my opinions, but I keep them private in the group texts, not broadcast.
Understood. So let's shift from your
Mhm,
career to
mhm,
your dating life in New
mhm,
York and how we ended up in Taiwan. And so when we talk about, making changes as you've done many times now, within the last, I guess, 5 years or so,
yeah.
right? 5, 6 years. Um, Again, like, how do you balance, I guess the word like balance,
Mhm,
work life balance, but how did you manage to balance that as you, met your husband,
mhm.
Kevin, who, for those who don't know, is a Michelin starred chef.
Woo!
And so chef life is also very, very busy,
Yeah,
and then, now with a newborn, et cetera. So you can start with your time in New York and how you guys met,
yeah.
and how that
Oh,
led you to be like,
dating
okay, I will
dating in
pick
New
up this.
York. God. It's like I have to stretch before I even discuss the concept of dating in New York. What an absolute misery. Um, thank God that's over. Thank God I found him. Man. So yeah, I of course, was on the apps and dating and doing all the things that you're supposed to do, dating in my 20s.
Just like your career books, you were doing all the
Yes.
things you're supposed to
Exactly,
do.
exactly. I would take breaks. I would ask to be set up. I would do the apps. Like, I would be like, when he finds me, I'll be like, whatever. I took every possible mindset toward dating. Whatever mindset gets you through. I don't think there's any one way to go about it, obviously, or it's all just luck and timing at the end of the day, is my belief now. But a couple years ago, 6 years ago, a friend of mine started dating a guy who worked in the wine business. And he had been a sommelier at the restaurant where my husband worked. And so basically, when your friend starts dating a great new guy, you're like, does he have friends? And so he invited us out. He invited like five of us single girls out with his coworkers, and Kevin was one of those coworkers. And yeah, we hit it off, and that it's funny because that's how I see the story, but his telling of it is different. I just went to this group hang. That's what I thought. From the other perspective, the guy, my friend's boyfriend, had told Kevin, I have a girl in mind for you. You have to come out with us Saturday night. This is her name. Like, only one of us knew it was a setup, basically, which I think is like low key the best way to do a setup. And so it did work. And we wound up staying up talking till like 10 in the morning that first night, which was a really good early lesson on what it's like to date somebody in the restaurant industry. Because I met him at 1 o'clock in the morning and we stayed up till 10 a.m. And I think that um, our careers are why we're together for so many reasons. I literally wouldn't have met him if he didn't work in restaurants and didn't know my friend's boyfriend. But also, our schedules were such that he was only off on Sundays and Mondays, and or at 2 a.m. Like, he was only available at 2 a.m. or on Sundays and Mondays. And so that worked for me because I was a freelancer, night owl. I could make that work, and I was willing to make that time available. I basically stopped working on Mondays, was, incommunicado on Mondays. And then, so that the literal logistical aspect of our relationship worked because of our two jobs. But also, I finally had found somebody who was so passionate about his work. I was always disappointed with the people I dated and found in New York. Like, you think in New York, it's a city of passionate people who came there for their careers, but I was frequently disappointed just by all my female friends were so passionate, and I could never find a guy who really like was happy with their work and like was so ambitious in all the good ways, not the bad ways. And Kevin was that. Like he was just so unbelievably passionate about food. And so I think our professional interests are, we're not in the same industry, but we are in the same, we have the same approach to our careers where we just give it everything. And even in our spare time, like I'm listening to podcasts and reading books about being a writer. He's watching TV shows, listening to podcasts about cooking. Like he's reading cookbooks in his spare time. You know, like we are very gung ho about what we've chosen to do in life. And I think we admire that in each other, and we both like we push each other along in the best ways. And so, yeah, that led to now we're married. And in terms of moving to Taiwan, you know, I'd always wanted to live abroad, and I used to joke with him that he would be my ticket to live abroad because we'd watch these chef shows like Chef's Table on Netflix where almost every single chef would say, "Oh, and then I spent 2 years in the south of Spain," or "Then I worked in Hong Kong." And I would say, "Don't you want to work in the south of Spain or Hong Kong or just somewhere and I can come with you?" And basically an opportunity finally arose, and so that's why we decided to go. But he's always quick to say that I pushed this along perhaps more than he did. You know, obviously we're here because he launched a business, but the real truth is that I wanted this like possibly more than he did, because it was really a dream of mine to live somewhere else. So now we got that, and yeah, that's my dating story. That's like the shortest version. That's like a 6-minute answer, and it's the shortest, least traumatic version of dating in New York that I can tell you.
But I was just thinking about what you said, that you and Kevin are very similar in terms of the way you approach work. And I remember him sharing a little bit about his own story about how he
Mhm,
started, cooking. And it is very similar to you. You guys
mhm.
both have that, like, this is what we want to do, and we'll get there. We're gonna, we'll just work wherever we need to work, to clock
Yes.
in those hours, to learn the skill sets, this and that. So
Yes.
that's it's very, very true.
Yeah.
I admire that as well.
Yeah, thank
But you know, so again, because the Curito Connects a lot of times talks about different challenges and impactful moments, right, that shape who you are in the work you do today. So obviously for you, it's from the very early days, you were super passionate about this. Not to say that there is no ups and downs for everyone. Like, everyone's journey is different. But when there were times that's difficult for you, what do you normally do to help you overcome them?
you.
Like the, like for instance, packing up and then moving out here to
Yeah.
a whole
Yes.
country that you've never been to. And it was shortly after COVID, I think, right? When you guys moved out here 2 years ago ish. Like, so
Yes.
all the like behind the scenes chaos. We talked
Mhm.
earlier when I introduced you about this very glamorous lifestyle,
Yes.
which
Yes.
sounds wonderful and lovely and so cool. You get to meet all these, celebrities and,
Mhm.
who's
Mhm.
who of the world, and you get to share their stories. But then, of course, there's all the behind the scenes stuff
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So
No,
how do you?
yeah, sometimes I worry that like I mean, I'm on Instagram like everybody else, but I'm not a huge, chronicler of my life on Instagram per se, but sometimes I do worry that I'm only showing like the fun or like wacky parts of living abroad and not the difficulties. But part of that is I just don't know how to frame the difficulties, or I'm working through them, on some level. So I'll cover both of those areas that you mentioned. So like from a career perspective, I've been laid off. I'm freelance because I've been laid off 3 times. Like 3 times, and 3 times in 8 years or something. And so I, if I could, yes, I love being a freelancer. I love working for myself. I know that about myself now. But if I could live in the heyday of the magazine heyday of maybe the 90s, where you got a clothing budget and a driver and you got 6 figures to do like maybe 3 hours a day of work, like I know this time Yeah, I know this time existed because I got to glimpse it a little bit because of my internships before the economic crash in '08. I got to see, I interned at Glamour where they would give me a town car to run errands. Like I had to do errands around town as an intern, and they would let me have a town car where I would direct the driver around the city, just running errands,
It's like the movies or like the TV
Truly,
shows we watch.
exactly. Yes,
New York
exactly like the
City,
movie.
internship, getting the
Yes.
Starbucks, delivering the
Yes.
clothes, etc., etc.
I mean, literally, like I was interning at the company where the Double Wears Prada takes place, of course, Condé Nast, and it was all of that. I mean, it was rooftop. I was 20 years old. I was going to rooftop parties to celebrate the fact that we finished an issue, which is to say, did our jobs, like a glamorous champagne, truffle mac and cheese rooftop party. It
Mm.
was so fun. So I know that era existed. And listen, I would have loved to work in that time. Okay. It was really fun. So, yes, I try not to dwell on it because that time is gone and it is what it is. And I still do get to do the work that I love. But yeah, that would have been cool to do it with health insurance in a sleek office, dressed up, where all three of your meals each day are paid for by the company. Like I would be ordering sushi for them. I can keep going down the list of how fabulous it was, but the point is, it was very hard to keep losing my job, especially as a 20 something in New York who wasn't getting paid much to begin with. Um, and it's like very depressing to me, truly, that the industry has collapsed and that journalism has collapsed the way it has, because it's so important, not just to me but to democracy. Not to get on my soapbox about that,
Yeah.
but of course it's really hard. And um outlets pay less every year, not more. So not only are you not keeping up with inflation, you're actually making very literally less every single year. So I'm clawing
Mm.
always to keep the work that I have and to diversify as much as I can. So that's definitely hard, not glamorous at all. And then in terms of living abroad, I mean, like I said, I always dreamt about living abroad since I was a tween. I thought that was like the coolest possible life, and I loved to travel. I had never felt more alive than when I was traveling into a new country. Like landing in a new country is my greatest high. Um, but and I thought that living abroad would be the same thing, but like every single day. And the truth is that it's really, really, really hard. I mean, part of it is that I went from, the west to the east. I went from the US to Taiwan, and I can't read the awnings. I can't even begin to communicate. Um, I don't know. It's definitely hard. I haven't had to make friends, really. I haven't had to put an effort to make friends since I was in college. I mean, all my friends at home in New York are from college or from my first jobs. And so I've had them all for at least 15 years. So I haven't really had to make effort to make friends since I was almost a teenager. So that's been really hard. Communicating is really hard. Navigating culture shock and the healthcare system and the paperwork, of course. All of these things are really hard. Sometimes it's just the day-to-day things that are a real struggle. Sometimes I can't let myself think about the big picture sometimes because I will freak out. Like having a baby here was actually delightful, like for the most part. But I have had just one appointment where I couldn't communicate with my child's pediatrician and something was being lost in translation. And I just burst into tears because I felt so frantic that I could not communicate on behalf of my child. And all of a sudden, the enormity of what we've done by choosing to have a baby in a foreign country where I can't even read his paperwork, it like really hit me all at once and I just couldn't stop crying. I got it together, but that stuff's really hard. I've been in Taiwan for 18 months now, a little over, and it's very, very difficult to move to a new country where you cannot communicate with 80% of the population, let's say. So I never, it's very cool. And I'm so glad we chose it. But on a day to day basis, it's definitely a challenge for sure.
Mm. But you're hustling through.
Yeah. I'm realizing you asked, how do I deal with it? I don't know how I deal with it. I call my mom and cry. I watch comforting reality TV. I schedule FaceTimes with friends. I try to be proactive about creating a life here that brings me joy, connecting with new people, and setting sort of dates with my husband and baby to explore our new city and get to know places, get to know new cuisines. Just try to remind myself of the excitement of why we're here and the pleasures of
Mhm.
Taiwan. That's those are some of the ways that I overcome
Cool.
these challenges and these this loneliness of it all, is remembering like, oh, this is why we came here. It's amazing here.
Mm. And how do you manage your freelance work now that, again, because the writing you do is for, I mean, it's a global readership, but
Mhm.
the companies are in the US,
Yes.
and people you would, the stories you would write for, et cetera, are more on the global or US
Yeah.
based, but
Yes.
you're physically here, and here being in Taiwan, and also, raising a young family now.
Mhm.
So as we talk about making, adapting to the changes you go through, how do you see that for you going forward, right? Because
Yeah.
how you mentioned earlier, like, I've been laid off 3 times in the
Yeah.
last 8 years. Publishing is done, but yet you're still so passionate about sharing stories, and through your writing. So as a freelancer in a different marketplace, and also it's quite competitive, right? Because now
Yeah.
everyone's a free, quote unquote,
Exactly.
freelancer. And then also, again, I not knowing the industry very well, but also I always wonder, like, oh, but then how do you position yourself? Like,
Mhm.
what kind of writer or category or columnist are
Yeah.
you? And the many shifts, again, that you can shift into, right?
Mhm.
You could label yourself in so many different ways,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes. Yes. Well, I'll say like in terms of like finding my niche and labeling myself, I remember meeting another writer who was male and maybe 20 years older than me. And when he heard about all the different kind of work I did and all the niches and, materials, he was like, wouldn't you do better if you just focused on one thing and made it your thing? And I kept thinking like, yeah, like, no offense to him, but I was like, yes, if you're like a boomer white man who came up in a completely different time of the industry, maybe it makes sense to just be a travel writer as he was, right? But I was like, if you're just a travel writer, then you're doing one story. I need to do a breadth of material and topics because I need to, first of all, it's how my brain works. I think I'd be sad if I only wrote about one thing or one area. I'm interested in pop culture and politics and travel and food and lifestyle and fashion. Like all these things are fun to me. So why would I narrow it down to one? And second, I just don't think that's how the industry necessarily works anymore. It's better
mm,
to be adaptable than to say this is my shtick and just wait for someone to hire you based on that shtick. So I write about all different kinds of things, and that's okay. Sorry, I completely forgot the other part of your question. Can you remind me? Sorry.
no, I was just asking in terms of how do you find that balance,
Oh
right?
yes,
As a freelance writer, nomadic freelance writer,
yes, yes, yes.
living outside of your core marketplace, and then
Right,
also raising a young family now. uh,
right.
it regards to finding time to write,
Yeah.
finding time to send out your blind emails to
Yes.
pitch
Yes.
stories, finding time to care for your young child,
Mhm.
finding time to go on dates with your husband, who
Yes.
does maybe only has was it Monday Tuesdays off or
Yes.
something,
Monday,
and then
Tuesdays. Exactly.
and then
Exactly.
after 2 a.m.s off, so just
Yes.
because there's only 24 hours in a day, right? and
Yes.
and writing, writing is also a creative outlet. So
Mhm.
I don't know for you if it's something where, like, when you're like, okay, I'm going to write or I'm going to pitch something, do you need, a moment of quiet to
Yeah.
sit down on your laptop to churn it out versus like you're on, you're busy doing your thing and suddenly you're like, I have an idea and you just whip out your phone and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
jot down a
Yes.
note.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. So you reminded me. Yes. So there's two sort of ways to answer that question. One is the logistics of working for American companies while I'm here. So generally as a freelancer, I just try to conduct myself being the easiest person to work with because I want editors to work with me because I deliver good product, but also that I am very easy to work with. I always, of course, try to hit my deadlines and send in stories that could run as opposed to are messy or have spelling errors. Obviously, I just try to do good work. I try to be very easy to work with. And so I barely want my editors to notice that I live abroad. So really, I still try to answer professional emails within 24 hours. Um, and I schedule calls. When I first got here, I used to frame things really apologetically, like, hi, I'm so sorry. I'm actually based in Taiwan, so it'd be better if we spoke at this time of day. I don't say that now because that's just not, people don't notice and people don't need it. All I say is I'm available from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern Standard Time because that is 9 p.m. to midnight generally in Taiwan when it's not daylight savings. So no apologies. I just say this is the time I'm available. In my signature, it notes that my email signature that I'm in Taiwan, but otherwise, really nobody needs to know. Like it's. I just want to be seamless. I want to be very easy to schedule with and work with. So that there's that answer. Sometimes it can be hard to like be on top of the trends in the US because I'm like, what, maybe I'm not getting the ideas that I would if I were around in New York, but I'm not doing a ton of trend kind of stuff these days. So that's okay. As for the other thing about balancing with kids, like, or a kid, singular kid, I'm still figuring that out because it's a couple of things. Like, I don't know what my bandwidth is for taking on work. As a freelancer, it's can be feast or famine with your workload. Like when sometimes you have a ton of work and sometimes you have nothing for a couple of weeks. Um, that's still true, but now I can't commit myself to that feast period in the same way. So I'm still grappling with that and I'm still adjusting to figuring out what my bandwidth is. Like in the very practical way, I try to take on assignments with longer lead times. Like I'm not very good these days at being super flexible and saying, "Oh yeah, I can do like that story sounds amazing and because I want it so bad, I'll deliver it in 24 hours." Like my baby will not allow for that. So everything has to be like a 2-week turnaround time. I kind of hate that because again, I want to be easy to work with and I want to be on call for whoever wants to work with me in case an amazing assignment pops up, but the reality of my current phase of life is I just can't. I'm still trying to figure out what I am capable of delivering. So I only want to
Mhm.
commit to the work I know I can do. And I'm still figuring out what I can do. So that's been really hard for me because I am ambitious and I do want to give my career my all. And I'm used to allowing it to take over my life in a very pleasant way. Like, oh my God, I have the most amazing story assignment. I'm going to spend the whole weekend on it. I'm interviewing this cool person. I'm going to watch all their movies. I'm going to take a long walk and think about the structure of the story. Like, I don't really have the brain space right now or the literal time to throw myself into stories in the same way. And that's definitely hard and something I'm adjusting to. But I'm trying to give myself a little bit of grace around that. And,
Good.
I always put on Instagram, like, oh, I just had this story published, or look at my new story. And another new mom DM'd me and was like, how are you doing this? I can't believe you're doing so much work. Like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I'm not doing that much work. And I have a part time nanny. And that's really important to talk about. Is like, I wouldn't be able to do this if I did not have help. So, always mentioning that that's how it's really getting done. The actual thoughtful work, like to your point about you need some brain space to write some sentences. Like I'm not writing the next great American novel, but I do need some brain room to write
Yeah.
this stuff. So I could not do that without her here and without like noise canceling headphones and some physical space away from my baby. Because if I hear him, I want to go play with him, or comfort him. So I need to get away from him physically, I find, to get the best writing done. I hope he does not mind that yet.
He will be saying that to you in a few years' time. Mom, I
Oh
hope you
gosh.
don't mind. Yeah.
Yeah. I need some space. Yeah,
I need some
totally.
space, exactly. Well, yeah, so it really is about adapting,
Mhm,
basically, as you've illustrated so lovely for us with all the wonderful things you've already gone through thus far in life, and there's still much
mhm,
more to go. But before, because we're getting
mhm.
close to time limit here, I do have a few questions
Sure.
that I usually ask my guests before we wrap up. But before I go into those three questions, I did want to bring back the topic of career advice, because I thought when you
Mhm,
were talking about that, I felt like that was quite important and
mhm,
helpful. I think for listeners to hear out in terms of when you emphasized blind emailing, and I wrote this down because I wanted to come back to you about it, was the art of blind emailing,
mhm, mhm.
you know,
Let's
and
yes. Yes,
yeah.
how to go about it. I you know, you gotta be succinct, you gotta have a really good, subject line, and you have to be okay following up. I mean, I get emails from people that are, like, those good, ambitious, like, young people kind of emails of, like, "I'd love to talk to you about this and I'm always happy to do it." But I often need like three follow-ups because my email inbox is like a black hole. So don't be afraid to follow up. But yeah, I think that like a sentence or two about who you are, a sentence or two about what you want, and a sentence or two about why is like all there needs to be. But it should like electrify you. I mean, when you send those, again, it should be like when you get their reply, it's like so exhilarating. Again, I just like, oh, what a dweeb, but it's so exhilarating. And I think that I send them to people I admire. I send them to editors I want to write for. I send them to subjects I want to interview. And so, yeah, it really runs the gamut professionally, but it's how so much has come about for me. Um, and if you happen to have a connection, definitely mention it. Like it helps you stand out a little bit, I think. But really, everything good in my life has come from asking for it pretty directly via the written word and taking every possible like I to every possible wedge of connection that you can find, because you never know who's going to open that door for you a little bit more. So maybe you met somebody quickly at an event and you just want to follow up and say like, let's continue that, or you had mentioned that you could introduce me to this person, will you please, like actually just taking that extra step. And you never know who's going to open the door for you a little bit wider. So always take every single connection that you make as an opportunity. It might be a professional opportunity, it might be a personal opportunity.
You just never know unless you
You
do
just never
it.
know. Yeah.
Mm. I like that. I think that's a good reminder for a lot of young people these days. So I
Yes.
thought too we should throw that in as an extra buffer there. So
Yeah.
okay, so last three questions. First, and I'll come back if you need me to remind you.
Mhm.
But first one is, what keeps you grounded?
Mm.
The second one is, and because you're a reader and podcast listener, so what books or podcasts or mentors who have helped you over the years,
Mhm.
whether it's a book, like maybe some of your career books
Mhm.
that you loved,
Mhm.
books that helped you that you maybe would go back to and reread over and over again, or when you speak to other people and they share something with you, you go, oh, this book, you should definitely read this one,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
you should definitely listen to this podcast, because I find a lot of very inspiring or useful things that has helped me, and I
Mhm.
think maybe it would help you. So that's the second one. And the last one is, what would you tell your younger self now? Like, what would you tell your younger self what you know now?
Mhm.
And another way to look at it is, what would you tell others who are listening to this episode who resonate with your story?
Mhm.
like a 2 cent, like Caitlin's 2 cent.
Mm. Okay, so what keeps these are all gosh, I really nothing like seeing the themes again of your life through somebody else's questions and
Lens.
someone else's framing because as I'm thinking of my answers, they're all along the same lines. So what keeps me grounded is definitely still writing. I journal whenever I can. It's definitely my form of therapy. I've journaled since I was, I don't know, 10. Not always perfectly, not always linearly.
Linearly.
Um, and I definitely go months without it as I have now, but just being able to just sit quietly and write um, is something that definitely keeps me grounded, and all kinds of different deep breathing exercises, which I feel like I'm passing on to my baby right now. So that is what keeps me grounded. Your second question was things people should read or listen to. Or things I read or listen to. I have done, which is like such a classic answer, The Artist's Way, which is like a best-selling for the last 30 years creativity kind of woo-woo workshop class thing. It's around a book. It started as a book. There are workshops and other like extracurricular aspects of it, but it is basically a book around developing your creative process. And you can take it sort of as a course, like a self-led course. It just guides you through exercises that help with creativity. I also know that there are like a million podcasts that also have these kinds of exercises. So whatever art is inside of you, it doesn't have to be writing, it could be painting, it doesn't even have to be an explicitly creative pursuit, but she tries to help you, the author, pull those things out. So I've done that. And I go back to some of the practices of the book when I'm feeling like a little stuck. And then as for podcasts, I listen to a podcast called Long Form, which is different interviews with writers, long form writers and journalists, typically who I admire, but even the ones that I've never heard of because maybe their work isn't something that I read on a regular basis or from an outlet I'm not familiar with. Um, I love hearing about other writers' careers and trajectories and hearing about their passion and how they approach the same kind of work that I approach. So I love the long form podcast. And then what would I tell my younger self? I mean, I'm frequently in conversation with my younger self because she just wanted the things she wanted so bad. And I almost did I really admire that little person who like went for it so hard, and she laid all the groundwork for me to have the life I have. So really I just want to tell her that you're going to get all the things that you want. Like I feel like I've seen those sort of Instagrammy kind of designed slides that say, remember when you wanted what you have now. I frequently am like, okay, big picture, to take us full circle back to your intro. I freelance write for a living. I'm often a travel writer who gets paid to go to cool places around the world. I live in a foreign country with my chef husband and my absolutely beyond perfect baby who's so cute. It's insane. Like what a dream life. If you had told 18-year-old me who was trying to figure out how to get those things, if you had told 22-year-old me who thought she'd never get a job, if you told the girl who was getting laid off, if you told the girl who was going on like 5 Bumble dates in a week with guys who wouldn't give her the time of day, like guys who were just disrespectful at the minimum. Like if you told me that I would have everything I ever wanted, I mean, wow, right? So that is what I want to tell that girl. And I'm not done by any stretch. And as I said earlier, it's really hard. It's often very hard on a daily basis. But I chose this particular life because it thrilled me and it still does. And I'm so glad I get to live it. So it's not always going to be easy. and there will be a lot of tears along the way, but 18-year-old me, like, you're going to get all the things that you want. So I can't say relax, because the lack of relaxation, the lack of chill is what got us here. But like, rest assured, you're going to have a fantastic, thrilling life. So yeah, don't worry. It's going to turn out.
So that's very positive. If you would
Yes.
reverse it as a 2 cent for other people, it'd be like, if you know what you really want, just go for it and find all the means you can to aim for that goal that you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also, like, I remember somebody recommending that you look at people who have really cool, thrilling lives and see how they did what they did. And that, I'm always interested to hear. I love surrounding myself with people who are passionate and who have created their own dream lives, and trying to figure out how they got there and what lights them up. I think you just have to follow what lights you up. And I love that kind of person. I don't have any time for the people who are like, maybe I like this. I don't know. Like, my life isn't turning out the way I want. Like, I need the people who are just, like, thrilled to do something, anything, follow what you love.
But that's true with, when they always say surround yourself with the same frequency of people so
Yes.
that it helps you get to where you want to be at, right? So what you're saying is exactly the same thing, because if you
Yes.
surround yourself with people who are not as gung ho about the topics or things you're interested in, that just drags you. You're not going in the right direction that you want to be going towards.
Yes.
So
Yes.
completely understand, and I think that
Yes.
is also very helpful. Lots of great career advice with Kaitlin today.
I try. I try. The person who's been unemployed for the last, like, 9 years, but yes, officially
Well,
employed.
but you are a freelancer.
Yes.
That's still
Yes.
employment. So it's
Self-employed.
not, again, we're living in a world where it's not so, black and white or resume
No.
looking, for
Yes.
job after job. In fact, you can all shape it however way you story tell it.
Yes. I agree. Clearly,
Yeah.
clearly, but yes.
But thank you so much for your time and sharing your journey with us. And then I will put your website and your information in the episode
Thanks.
resources, including the book you recommended and the podcast. And so if there are other publishers or people who need stories written, they can maybe reach out to you as
Yeah.
well, for English only.
Yes.
No,
So far.
not Chinese yet. Yeah.
No.
So, but yeah, thank you so much. And I don't know if you have anything else you want to add on to our conversation before we close off here.
No, just thank you so much, Jen. It was so lovely chatting with you. I really, really appreciate this time.
Oh, me too. Well, thank you for sharing. I think you might be my first journalist actually on Curito Connects.
Oh,
So
delightful,
that's fun.
delightful.
Yes,
Yes.
delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.